Good evening, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay? I was told I have to use the microphone, otherwise I would not for a group this size, but I'm being forced to. Well, first of all, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. For those of you who normally come, Andrea usually runs these programs, and unfortunately she's out with the flu today. So I work for Andrea, so I will be running the show tonight. So how many people have been to Products That Count presentations before? Excellent. So good. A lot of new people tonight. I'm really excited to see that. So hopefully we'll see you at continued events. For those of you who don't know, Products That Count is a community of 17,000 product managers around the country. It was started in San Francisco by our founder, S.C. Miata, and expanded to New York City, Seattle, and San Jose. So besides speakers that we have a whole website filled with content, podcasts, and invite-only executive retreats. So we're very thankful that you're here with us this evening. In the upcoming months, we'll have several speakers here in this office. So hopefully you'll keep the lookout for those and be getting our emails about those events coming up. So at the end of the event, I do want to call out for those people who can stay around. We'll be doing a few 10-second shout-outs. So for those of people who are actively looking for product roles, please feel free to come up, introduce yourself, talk a little about what you're looking for. Those of you, including myself, who are looking for people on your team or for your organization and want to talk about positions that are open, please feel free to come up and do that as well. So we'll do that after our Q&A session. So, and before we actually introduce our speaker, I just want to take a moment to thank DigitalOcean for their space this evening, for the food, the drinks, and everything. So let's give them a round of applause for offering this to us every month. And I'd also like to thank our sponsors from Amplitude and M-Particle. It's a few people here from there, I believe. I know a couple. Excellent. So thank you to you guys very much. All right, and with that, I would like to introduce our speaker for tonight. Julia Beizer, I had to ask several times, is joining us this evening from Bloomberg Media, where she's the CPO, newly CPO, as I just found out. I'm sure she'll give you more background on that. Prior to that, she held positions at the Huffington Post, as well as a decade at the Washington Post, where she worked on both product and news. So we'd like to thank you for coming tonight, and I will let you take it from here.
Can you all hear me? Awesome. All right, thank you so much, Products That Count, for having me, and for all of you for coming. That's super awesome. I am really excited to share with you a bit about my work and a bit about how I think about product in the news space. But first, I'd like to bore you with a little bit about me. So, like most people in product, I backed into this career in a totally weird way. I actually started my career as a journalist. I'm so adorable, as you can see. I often joke that I was a reporter of no consequence. I wrote about like 10 great cupcake places in DC, where to get a martini so you feel like you're in Mad Men, just like stuff that didn't matter. Very, very fun work in your early 20s, highly recommend it, but you know, I wasn't exactly like getting a Pulitzer Prize. Anyway, then this started happening. And if you care about journalism, as I do, this was like a revolutionary moment, right? Because all of a sudden our content's being read by more people than ever on phones, which we never really imagined, and through social networks, it's driving more people to our content. And we didn't have a great plan for how we were going to take advantage of this. We just sort of saw it as this big, awesome wave, and we weren't sure what to do about it. And if you care about journalism, like I do, the problem to solve wasn't journalism at all, and it certainly wasn't cupcakes. The problem to solve was distribution, monetization, experience. So at that point, I took every opportunity I could to start working with the dev team. I was very fortunate. My boss went on maternity leave, and she had me take her place on my first big project, which was redesigning WashingtonPost.com's article page templates. And I had a really interesting role to play. I knew something about the CMS because I had used it as a reporter, and so I could speak to the workflows. And I started working with the dev team on that. And really just caught the bug. I went on to leave the news side of the business and be in a true product role. So I went on to build every mobile product the Washington Post ever built. First as a member of the newsroom, and then moving over to the business side. I moved over to the business side at a really strange time for the company. 6 weeks after I joined, or after I switched teams, Jeff Bezos bought the company. I thought to myself, oh my God, I'm gonna get fired, right? Here's this guy, he clearly knows something about mobile. He's probably gonna bring in his own people. But luckily he did not. And he invested very heavily in my group. So we did a ton of innovation that I'll touch on a little bit around that time. Left about 2 years ago. I was at HuffPost for 2 years, working on product tech, and I oversaw product tech and design for that company. And just a month ago, took a job at Bloomberg Media as chief product officer, which I'm pretty psyched about. So anyway, that's my story. Why do I care about it? Because I think it's the definition of products that count. If you look at news right now, we are facing so many challenges. That Business Insider picture shows something I'm sure you guys have read about in the press. Google and Facebook are capturing virtually all new ad spend dollars. That's putting a lot of pressure on our top line as a business and how we're going to grow. As a response, I'm picking on CNN here, but they're just one of the most recent places to, invested a lot in digital, has had to pull back. Even just today, like after I made these slides, like Vox laid some people off today. Like it's brutal out there. And then fundamentally, journalism is really about holding power to account, giving voice to the voiceless. There are many people, not just this guy, who aren't a fan of that. And so journalism as a whole faces sort of wars on many fronts. And so what do I think product can do in that environment? I see product playing a role in content companies as a bit like a traffic cop on a very, very busy highway. There's competing demands all around. The journalists who want to protect their sources and tell stories in a certain way. Designers who want clean, uncluttered experiences. Business side people who do not, right? Who want very cluttered experiences in advertising and all that good stuff. And of course, development that wants to build scaled, awesome solutions. I see product as the voice of the consumer in that whole, melee, trying to make sure that our North Star at the end of this is the human being on the other side who's trying to be informed and making sure we are solving for them. My teams and I have always taken on projects that kind of fit in these 4 themes. Engagement, how we deepen your relationship with our sites. Reach, how we reach more people than ever. Revenue, which it surprises me that I care about, being a news person who can barely ad, but I'm learning. It's the biggest problem to solve. And of course, innovation and new story forms. I'm going to share some examples of some work I've done, but I'd love to take your questions during, after, whichever way they say it's okay for me to do it. Start with engagement. So this is the real challenge, right? More people are visiting news sites than ever before, but they're not sticking around. They're coming in through search, they're landing on our pages, and then they're kind of going on their merry way. Our real challenge is to try to draw those users into deeper relationships with us as a news site. DAU over MAU, those kind of metrics that I think product people think about all over the place. That's something that I've seen a real professionalization of that kind of product tactics to get to that over the last couple of years in the business. One of the things we talk about a lot is how we build those relationships. And like I'm saying, we really think a lot more about the tactics than once we used to. So newsletters, for example, email newsletters, having a bit of a renaissance thanks to mobile mail. People are engaging with that more. So a lot of product work I did at HuffPost was about driving those newsletter subscriptions. Through a variety of on-site marketing messages, targeting based on what we knew about the users, we were able to, and reducing friction, doing things like auto-filling your email address, stuff like that, we were able to boost our subscriptions by 30%. But the buck doesn't stop there, of course. How do you make sure people open those emails? How are you testing your subject lines? How are you thinking through, when you send and optimizing send time? We spend a lot of work thinking about that. On the right is a crazy, crazy thing that we did at the Washington Post. So mobile social users, people come in on their phones through a social network, land on one story, usually bounce after reading that one story. I had a friend that once said, hey, look, if you get a user to do anything else after coming in on that article, you're playing with house money. They didn't come for that, right? They came for that one article. So we thought, that's a bit of a challenge. And way before Snap Stories and before Insta Stories and all the other story formats, we thought, could we play with a horizontal swipe to try to get people to engage more when they come in this user experience? What we're showing here is something we called pinch view, is essentially a little peek from the next article over, eating up a lot of real estate. I wouldn't call this the best design out there, but it was effective. 22% lift in page views per visit for users who saw this experience over control. Now, we ended up stopping that experiment for a variety of internal factors. But what it taught me, what the whole experience taught me, is that in news, big, drastic experiments are what moves the needle. I had the good fortune in the end of my time at HuffPost. HuffPost is owned by AOL, which is owned by Verizon. Verizon just bought Yahoo. There's a big marriage going on. As part of that, I got to work a lot with Yahoo. Now, Yahoo, at Yahoo's scale, they can A/B test, multivariate test a button color and yield real results, right? 0.05% lift matters in the scale of a big company like that. In news, we're not fortunate enough often to have that kind of scale. So for real A/B tests to matter, to see if we can drive some real change, drastic things work better as experiments. They may not always work for your business. This one did not. But they're able to get us results more quickly. Oh, and little anecdote. So when we launched this site, the first tweet we got was some guy saying, like, is your page broken, Washington Post? What is this, a website for ants? And I was like, I love this. Favorite tweet I ever got. All right, who's heard of the pivot to video? Yeah, pivot to video. So the pivot to video is shorthand in the news industry for publishers who forsake all text in favor of creating short form video with text on top that until very recently was favored by the algorithms of the platforms like Facebook. Also, another cynical reason people pivot to video, the CPMs we get from advertising are just so much higher on video content. I'm a little more optimistic about why news organizations need to embrace video. I don't think it's only for the cynical reasons. I think video is universal. I think no matter what language you speak, you can see those pictures and that can make you feel something or make you think something. I think that's powerful. I watch my children, they're 4 and 6. They don't understand why the pictures don't move. There are plenty of studies out there that say, hey, look, time spent on video is up to half of what people spend on media in a day. Now, look, you're all product people. That's not a fair fight. That's a bad use of the statistic, right? Of course, video takes more time. It takes time to watch it. We shouldn't fault text because it's efficient and people know how to get through it. That being said, it's still meaningful. People are still engaging with it. And my own point of view is that the future of news video isn't going to look like broadcast segments. It's not going to look like AC 360. All apologies to Anderson Cooper. It's going to look like something different. And if we don't experiment with that now, we will be disrupted. But that's really a content problem. And I'm happy to give my opinions on it to anyone who will listen. But fundamentally, that's about experimenting with new formats, how our creators can make things that really resonate with users in that mobile context. Where it becomes a product problem is discovery. Users end up on our sites for text, largely. And so how do we showcase from them, hey, there might be something in a slightly different format that you want to see? Now, look. Publishers across the board, as you all know as citizens of the internet, are experimenting with autoplay, and there's lots of video yelling at you no matter what site you go to. And I've certainly done my fair share of that myself. But the platforms are going to shut down how we think about autoplay. So it's up to us to think about new ways we can merchandise and showcase, hey, look, there's some video. At HuffPost, what that meant for us was essentially the theory was, hey, look, a static image doesn't do justice to the power of video. Can we use GIFs to kind of entice people to click in? And so we replaced our poster images with these moving images and saw a 27% lift in click-through over control. And so that for us kind of showed, hey, look, if you show a little delight, you can maybe get people to check out what you're doing. At Bloomberg, we take a slightly different approach. So Bloomberg has such a strong live, we have a broadcast business. So we have a lot of video assets and a lot of video watched on our site. But when we get into video on demand, we're really focused on how to keep you flowing through a video playlist. We use collaborative filtering to look at the kind of videos you've watched, text you've read, to recommend different kinds of videos and move that forward. It's early days for us, but we're pretty excited about the results. Reach. So reach has been a really interesting journey, as I was alluding to earlier. You know, we have users used to type in your website or bookmark it or whatever. That's not how people show up on our content these days. Search was the first wave. The Huffington Post somewhat famously had its first real like awesome traffic coup when it wrote a story called "What Time is the Super Bowl?", which was this massive question people were asking in search, and just having that headline in the era of search in 2005 was like this blockbuster win, and the entire news industry was like, why didn't we think of that? You know, it's like this big kind of cries of conscience. So that was search. Then along came social. In 2015, it got very sophisticated. Platforms, Twitter, Apple News, Facebook Instant, and Google with the AMP project said, hey, publishers, we've been seeing what you've been doing there with those article pages. Super cool, but you know what? We know a lot more about tech. And we can build you a better article page, and it'll be faster, and it'll be prettier, and there'll be all this access to new users if you come natively publish on our platform. Publishers were wary of this gesture, but kind of went along for the ride to see how it would go. As a publisher in that time, I was working for the Washington Post when the distributed era started. It was exciting. It was really fun to like work with the platforms about, hey, look, what could we build together? And for the first time, the playing field got a little even, because the platforms came in with these big grand pronouncements, as I said, of, oh yeah, we know how to do articles better than you do, and your article pages are so slow. And then they got into the weeds and realized, oh, you know what makes it slow? It's that advertising stack, and how do we solve that problem? And so we were really working together on collaborative problem solving. You know, I guarantee you no one in Silicon Valley had thought about breaking news and like how stories evolve the number of times I've done that. I mean, to give you a somewhat depressing example, like a train crashes in Russia and like the death count is 27, and then all of a sudden it's 35, and you have to update that headline, and your caching rules have to take advantage of that, take note of that change. That was something that, as news companies, we could really work with the platforms on. Anyway, it was fun while it lasted. It was a good party. But I think what publishers found overall in the distributed era was, hey, look, we're not really sure what we got out of this. We got some distribution, but we're not sure it really matched our return. We didn't make a lot of money. We didn't deepen our relationship with these users. We gave up a lot, and we're not sure what we got. So I think we're in an interesting era for reach now, and what you'll see is a change in how publishers are approaching deals with the platforms. This is a symbiotic relationship. The platforms serve millions and millions of customers. They've built fantastic places to hang out. There just isn't a lot to do at the party if there isn't content there, and I think you know, news publishers can play a big role in that. Bloomberg, before I got there, but one of the reasons I joined, because I'm super excited about this product, worked with Twitter to create something called TikTok. TikTok is a 24/7 streaming network that we've created in partnership with Twitter. And so far it's been really successful for us. We have 1 million viewers a day, 140,000 followers, which is the metric we care the most about, because we're, again, just trying to make sure people connect with us. And we were able to drive 850,000 concurrents during the State of the Union. What we do on TikTok is not only bring together news video and commentary and analysis, we pull in tweets and content from Twitter to kind of showcase the full social conversation around a given news event. So that's been really fun. What's been great about this is a reach project. It's great for us, enormous exposure. What's been great about it for a reach project is both Twitter and Bloomberg are getting something out of the arrangement. And so I think as you watch media evolve over the next couple of years, you'll see more deals like this that are more mutually beneficial. Revenue, like I said, this was a bit of a change for me, and I think news companies broadly. We've had to get more sophisticated about how we think about our businesses online. At least at the places I've worked, advertising revenue is the lion's share of our revenue. And so we're in a three-sided marketplace, right? I mean, advertisers are one of our constituents. And thinking about how we solve for advertiser challenges can be really fun. We've developed some innovative ad products over time. But can also be like nuts and bolts stuff. And viewability is one of them. So for those of you who aren't familiar, viewability is a metric the advertising agency or the advertising industry relies on to show that the ad has actually been seen. What I love about what Bloomberg's done here, and this is before my time, but I'm gonna, be proud of it anyway, is they've used motion to subtly pull the ad, in this case a video ad, and then later a standard display ad, into like a viewable fixed position on the screen. So instead of breezing by the ad just sort of travels over to the side. What I love about that is that it's meeting that advertising goal. There are plenty of other ways to reach the advertising goal of viewability. You can keep the ad fixed, do a big takeover. There are lots of ways you could solve it. But this is moving it subtly over to the side, so you're preserving the reading and watching experience while you're meeting that metric. And that's the kind of product creativity I think we want to bring to bear on the advertising side. Increasingly, publishers have to diversify our revenue streams and think about different ways to make money. Consumer pay is something that a lot of publishers are looking towards. I was at the Washington Post for the launch of our subscription product, digital subscription product, and it was, for those of you in e-commerce or anything like that, a true conversion funnel. And this was something I didn't think, at least our news company had a very sophisticated understanding of at the time, but it was a muscle we really had to develop. I was very fortunate during my time there, one of the Bezos projects, to work on an app internally known as Rainbow that we pre-installed on Kindle Fire devices. The model for that app was super cool. So all users started out with 6 months free access to the app. And once you hit your 6-month limit, we would ask you to pay $1 for another 6 months. So it's $1 basically for a year. And then after that, that $1 would roll into a $3.99 a month subscription. So once we launched, woohoo, we launched. Oh my gosh, we started thinking, wow, we got to figure out what our plan is to get people over that $1 hump. And we weren't content to just put up a wall at the end of it and hope people converted. We wanted to think about a gradual, month-long marketing ramp, essentially, a campaign we would run throughout the app to try to get people to subscribe. Started very subtle, just little, hey, by the way, this is about to go away kind of messages. Ads, the user experience was 2 articles side by side, and you just swipe through them. Little ads in between telling you about it. And then we got more aggressive towards the end with our countdown clock at 6 days, telling you, that it's now or never, you got to subscribe, and played with some animation to hide those in a menu. So that was a lot of fun. And I'll tell you, it was great, fantastic product work, but it was also really great for the company overall because we really, like I said, exercise that muscle of how to work a funnel and how to test and learn and how to figure out what's working and what's not. And we were able to drive to like a 12% conversion, which is pretty cool for people who hit this wall and decided they wanted to pay the $1. So that was a really, really awesome experience. Oh, and this is silly, but as we were experimenting with what to do, we were like, hey, we've got an idea. Maybe we'll just run a dollar bill up the flagpole in between the two articles, try to show people that it's only $1. And we did not ship this idea, but it was all part of a really fun ideation process. And over my time in news, I have spent countless hours with whiteboards brainstorming really fun things we could do around the news. I've spent more time on election maps than I care to think about. But the time we spend thinking about how we make our money and how we connect with our users, that's a place where I haven't spent nearly as much time thinking about and innovating. And it's new in the business, but I think it's more vital than ever to care about that and start thinking about it. All right, well, here's the fun stuff. Okay, the way we consume all content is obviously changing so drastically right now. News will be completely left behind and obsolete if it doesn't change along with it. I submit to you that the column of text, something we've been doing since the days of Gutenberg and we're essentially recreating on the phones, isn't good enough. It's fine for the 80%. But if you're trying to tell a story and really compete for the share of attention, you've got to try some different ideas. And so I've spent a fair bit of my career doing that. This is a really fun project we did at HuffPost. Right before the election, we were wondering what data we could find out about the followers of both Clinton and Trump on Twitter that could tell a story. And so what we did is we ingested the bio data that people type in on Twitter, people who followed both Clinton and Trump, either Clinton or Trump, and people who followed both. And then we ran some analysis about the words we found. And what we found was fascinating. It was sort of exactly what you would expect. Trump supporters, motorcycle. Clinton supporters, bicycle. Trump supporters, beer. Clinton supporters, wine. And so there was this really interesting thing we were seeing about how people, the politics of identity really, how people describe themselves. First Amendment versus Second Amendment. Those were things that came up. And we exposed this data in a story form to users trying to say, hey, look, here's what our reporters found. This is what we found interesting. This is our high-level takeaway. But it also allowed users to search for any word. And Beyonce, as you can see, is somewhat universal. It's something people love in their Twitter bios. But that, I think, was a cool opportunity for us to showcase, to take a look at just the data set and see what kind of stories you could tell on that. Also with the election, obviously a lot has been written over the last year about, is social dividing us? What are we doing as a community? Like, this world we've created, is it the one we want to live in? It's been a little dark. But I think that's a lot of an opportunity for news as well. So if the digital era and news in the digital era can tell us apart, no one knows what a fact is anymore, what obligation do we as a news organization that does have a bias for fact, what obligation do we have to solve for that? The first product I took on in this space was called the Flip Side. And the goal of the Flip Side was, as we were learning right after the inauguration, more and more about filter bubbles, about how you could end up in Facebook and only see news from people who thought like you. How could we combat that? And so what we came up with was a way you could filter all of the subjects being shared widely on Twitter. You could filter links being shared on Twitter by topic, and then we would plot those news sources on a chart from liberal to conservative and trustworthy to untrustworthy. And what this exposed was, hey, look, you click on Russia investigation, what you're seeing is a lot of activity from Breitbart, a lot of activity from the Washington Post and the New York Times, and you click in and you could see the links and you could see the difference in the headlines. And, sort of have a peek at how the other half lives. Now, look, there's an inherent problem in this product set, right? If you're in a filter bubble, I don't know that you're like, geez, I would really like to get out, I'm not sure that there's a lot of consumers who would benefit from this the most, who really want to go see it. But it exposed something interesting about the way we share online and the way different news services interact. Looking ahead, later in the year, HuffPost, in kind of the aftermath of the election, decided, hey, look, we want to go on a bus tour. 22 cities, 23 cities. We want to go on a bus tour and really get to know, what makes us American. Try to answer that question. As a companion to that piece, we launched a digital product where we'd ask users to go to this website and then identify themselves in up to 3 ways. We provided a list of options where you could type in anything. I'm a mom. I'm a product manager. I'm a fan of country music. You could type those 3 things in. And we asked you for your zip code. The end result, once you did that, was that you'd create a card you could share on social. We showcased a whole river of cards that kind of showed the variety of people interacting with this thing. But what got interesting about it is that we also plotted them on a map. And so you could see at a glance, hey, look, I'm going to filter by where all the moms are, and you know what? They're all over the country. So are country music fans, and so are product managers. And so the point of this visual, and we didn't get too heavy-handed with this, but the point was what unites us is greater than what divides us. And if there's a way to show that, particularly for a site like HuffPost that does deal so much in identity politics, it seemed like it was a good fit for our brand. Sorry for the blurry screenshot. I'm bummed about this one. VR and AR, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention them. Still super nascent and not really mainstream for our core news consumers. But I think it's a revolutionary possibility. I mean, if you believe that news is about the democratization of information, being able to create experiences to bring people to places they could never go, and to allow people to have empathy for people in situations that are not like theirs. It's kind of a core job that we in news try to do. While I was at the Washington Post, we were lucky enough to get some images from NASA all about the surface of Mars, and we built this whole VR experience. And we did a downloadable, something that would go along with your Oculus and all that good stuff. But we also did some work experimenting with A-Frame and doing it for the web. And what I loved about that, even though, oh my goodness, that was early days, these images are way too big for your phone browser, and there's like lots of technical challenges therein. What I loved about that is essentially we were saying, hey, look, we don't want VR and the experience of this place to be limited to you have to have a $2,000 headset. And I think you'll see news continue to push into those spaces. VR and AR is expensive, especially to be done well. So I think another thing news has to do in the space is think about repeatable formats that we can bring to the universe of VR, and see how we fix it. Finally, OTT. I'm really bullish on this, particularly in my new job. I think, I buy into video, pivot aside, I buy into video, and I think OTT platforms are kind of an emerging way we're doing video. It's not quite long form, it's not quite short form. It's a place where people can connect directly with brands. At Bloomberg, we're really big into this. We're investing a lot in OTT platforms and building up audiences there, and trying to innovate with the format in the space. So I think that's a huge opportunity for us to crack the ambient content market. Because, and just as a bit of a final thought, when I think about news in the space, there's been a lot written about the Trump bump. The Trump election actually drove subscriptions at the Washington Post and the New York Times, and the Trump bump, oh, is this going to save journalism? All of a sudden, people are going to pay for it. The problem that you'll find with any sort of Trump bump is, what's the churn like? Is it sustainable, that bump? And I don't know, because I don't work there. But my contention is that it's probably not. Because as news companies, we haven't done a good enough job of fitting into people's lives the way people live now. People aren't spending that 30 minutes in the morning with the morning paper. They're not spending 30 minutes at night with the evening news. They're picking up news in fits and starts throughout their day, sometimes from social, sometimes atmospherically. That's a huge opportunity for exposure. But I think news companies need to do a better job of feeling more essential to readers throughout their day, and more intentional. And OTT strikes me as an opportunity for us to break into kind of that ambient experience of news when you put something on while you're doing something else, like making dinner. I'm always looking for ways in my work to think, how can we make this fit the way people live instead of wishing they would set aside time for us? We're in a multitasking world. I barely set aside time for myself. So making sure we're cognizant of that when we think about our users. And that's all I had to share. So I'd love to take any of your questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Julia. Let's give Julia a round of applause. All right, thank you again. In my years in product management, I will definitely say the news is changing faster than I've ever seen it change before, and you will have no shortage of interesting meetings, I'm sure, over the next few years to keep you very busy. So we have some microphones that are going to come around. Just raise your hand if you have a question, and we'll take some questions for 5 or 10 minutes.
Is this thing on? Cool. My name is Michael. I actually work as a software engineer at LinkedIn on editorial content products. So a lot of kind of what you mentioned are questions and philosophical things that we're all working through as well. One of the questions that I had, it seems like there's a lot, especially on kind of the Bloomberg and HuffPost side of things, on experimentation, particularly around the stories you can kind of tell with data. And my question is, those are kinds of questions, again, that we're kind of grappling with. How do you think about tying those into kind of an overall content strategy? If I was thinking at it from a development perspective, it would be, allocating resources to do a particular type of data visualization or a particular type of storytelling medium. How would you think about tying in those kind of experimental formats with kind of a more holistic strategy?
Sure. We were talking about this earlier before we started. Look, experimentation has always been central to what I do, and my time was very much, my point of view on that was very much shaped by the Bezos era at the Washington Post, which was experiment boldly, experiment quickly, and turn it up to 11. Don't do a 10% test over 30 days and check your results. Like, turn it up to 100 for 3 days and see how it goes. So I like to build it in a couple of ways. I think that I have one group that's focused exclusively on news experiments at Bloomberg today, and I think that's a really solid way to test out ideas. News moves so fast, turns over so quickly. You can actually try out small ideas in a short amount of time and then see if that folds into your core product. I think that we have an innovation team at Bloomberg that I think is super cool, like design thinking, IDEO style. I'm really focused right now, I'm brand new in the job, I'm really focused right now on making sure that all the PMs know that is their job. Because I've organized PM teams a number of different ways. You can say, oh yeah, you're the guy for the apps, or you're the guy for the web, or whatever. But more interesting problem is, you're the person who solves DAU over MAU. You're the person who solves the conversion funnel. And so then you're solving a thematic problem, and the world's your oyster on how you solve that. And so for me, building that kind of innovation into what we're doing is important.
Thanks.
No worries.
Hi.
Hi
there. I'm John Harper. I'm a former journalist of no consequence as well. I work with the Cleveland Plain Dealer.
Oh, right on.
And I'm working with a startup now. We're experimenting with a new type of news aggregator. You were talking a little bit about how the relationship between news publishers and platforms has changed and seems to be changing a lot in the last year or so. I'm wondering where you see that going and where you see kind of the access point for news changing as it is now and in the future, how you think that's going to go?
Great question. The frenemy description has been used a couple of times for publishers and the platforms. I think that's probably apt, though I will say, I'm definitely more on the friend side. I've really loved working with the platforms, but there are challenges there. How do I see it going over time? I think that publishers, again, the broad theme I see here is that publishers are getting a greater sophistication about how they think about their businesses. And so a hand on the rudder on how your business is doing with anything you're working with on a third party, whether it's a big tech platform or just your average partner, is something we need to think about. So I think what you'll see from publishers going forward is saying, hey, look, what does success look like at the end of this thing if we dance with you? And keeping a clear eye on those metrics and then making decisions accordingly. That's something that I think publishers did even in the early days. They were very wary and skeptical of these partners and sort of tried them out because of the opportunities of scale. But what we've developed, especially those of us who are fortunate enough to develop our own tech in-house, we've developed as a way to track our own metrics. Look at our own dashboards. Don't ever give me a dashboard of your site. Like, give me an API and I'll plug it into my own. And that way I can monitor my own performance and decide what my own benchmarks are. I think there's a nice symbiosis there. Like I said, there's a lot of positives. I mean, look, if I knew nothing about news and I was just like a PM for Facebook or whatever, I would be really grateful for someone on the other side who, understood what an API is and could also explain to me why breaking news is important or why we try to differentiate news and opinion and why that matters. I'd be grateful for that. So I think there is a nice symbiotic relationship, but I think publishers just now, you're seeing a little bit more vigilance about what it means for their bottom lines, top lines. No worries.
Hi, Julia. My name's Perna. I was at Mashable as a product manager across like editorial and video and OTT.
Right
so
on.
a lot of the stuff that you talked to today really resonated with me, and I'm at Quartz now, running product there. But the question I guess I had for you is, especially like during my time at Mashable, really bullish on like OTT and video and experimentation. I guess the question I had for you, and one thing that we really struggled with, is like, how do you run experimentation on platforms where you don't control the data, that there aren't, A/B tests, like even on something like Snapchat, right? We really struggled with like how to be a data first culture. How do you like run those kinds of experiments? I mean, I know it's a partnership with editorial, but it was just such a struggle to like optimize OTT platforms for the kind of content. So I'd love to kind of get your insight on how you think about optimizing on platforms where you honestly have no control over. I mean, Facebook being probably the most predominant one, but especially on OTT.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I'm really big on is anecdotal. Anecdotal is not the right word. It's really like content success, because fundamentally, you can look at a list of like most popular stories on a platform, right? And you're like, oh, okay, right? And any, one of the companies I worked for, this business guy was like, hey, the CPMs on our cars content is really high. We should write more about cars. And it was like, do you want to be a general interest business, or do you, cars don't have the scale that what we do does, right? So I think having content people in the mix to look at those experiments to say, hey, look, qualitatively, what does well for us on these platforms is, stuff that touches on emotion or touches on identity politics was a big thing for us. So I think looking at the content is a helpful measure. I think that, working with those partners to make sure there's some transparency in the beginning on what kind of metrics you have. I think Facebook over time has developed a lot of things that have been extraordinarily helpful. And I know there are some publishers who are like, look, I don't have the transparency. I can't do this anymore. It's not me, it's you. I'm breaking up. Like I need to have this transparency to keep the hand on the rudder of my business. And I've also seen, like, I have some friends in the industry who do some crazy stuff with like backing into performance by looking at like their revenue, because that's something they do control on some of these third-party platforms. So I think looking for the data anywhere you can find it, and then trying to just being really crisp at the beginning, like which metric will equal success. Because my experience has been is that in the fog of war after a launch, you're like, oh, well, it didn't do the thing we wanted it to do, but this is up. And it's like, does that being up matter? And just having the intellectual honesty to have those hard questions when everyone's like looking for a win, I think is hard. So I don't have a great answer for you. Like, you're in black box territory. So backing into whatever metrics you can, and then deciding you're going to have to cut off investments if you can't see what you're going to do. Yeah. So, hey.
Hey, I really enjoyed the presentation. My name is Ben. I'm actually from Amplitude Analytics. We're
Okay.
one of the sponsors in the event. But one of the things that occurred to me when you were talking about short form video, like spewing audio at you uncontrollably when you get to a news site, was that with the 24-hour news cycle built in the way that it is, and political pundits sort of jawing at each other, most people just want the high-level news events and hearing about it in a short and concise way. And sometimes it's surprising when those short form videos kind of pop up, or those are the options when you were actually looking for text on a website. So one of the things that's been really a breath of fresh air for me when I look for news is that Reuters has this option for OTT platforms and also for their website, where it's like 15 minutes of canned content, and it's long form video, and each segment is like 5 minutes. And it's a really easy way to digest the news if you're on the go. Do you see that type of content like being canned in that way, being purposed across any other media outlets like Bloomberg or anywhere else that you've been familiar with?
Yeah, absolutely is the answer. And I think the success of The Daily, the New York Times podcast, is an example of just that. What I love about The Daily is that, I mean, you would be surprised, maybe not, about how often people are like, oh, can we just get a feed of headlines? Like anyone who wants to work with a news publisher, oh, do you have a feed of headlines? It's like, man, I've made that product so many times and it's boring, and it's hard to get people through some headlines. What I love about The Daily is it says, hey, look, we're going to go really deep on one story, and then we'll give you 3 minutes at the end where here's some other things you need to know. And I actually feel as a human being more informed by that. And more importantly, that fits into my life, to get into my last point. The Daily says hey, look, listen to me on your commute, or listen to me. And I hate podcasts. I'm new to New York. I'm avowedly anti-podcast. I don't understand what all you New Yorkers do with the podcasts all the time. It's just never been a thing for me. But man, that podcast totally rules. And I just put it on the Alexa while I'm getting ready for work. It's that ambient content thing. And then focus group of my husband, right? He has this weird thing he does on at night where he'll just put on YouTube on Apple TV and just watch clips from the late night shows from the day before. And it's what is that? Is that short form? Is that long form? Is that, investing in a program or a brand? It's no, he's browsing a longer form content set. And so I think that's why I'm bullish not only on the experience part, the tactical stuff that product managers can do, but also why content has to be involved in that. There's a format experimentation play we have to do right now, right? For those of you who've worked very closely with Facebook, to get involved in their ad break play on video, it's first the video had to be 90 seconds, and then it had to be 3 minutes, and there are these rules you had to meet in order to take advantage of some of the revenue opportunities. And so that was driving the way we were creating content. What's you don't hear about in a formula like that is where are the users, right? And to be fair to Facebook, they came up with those numbers because that's where people were watching, and it seemed like a natural place. It was data-driven. But I think we'll be looking at content in all sorts of different shapes, sizes, lengths, formats, and we owe it to ourselves to do that. Otherwise, we're going to be long columns of text when all the world's moved on to stories. We're going to be long columns of text when the rest of the world has moved on to the holograms that tell you what the weather is. I mean, the world's moving really fast, and if we don't experiment on the content side, someone's going to do it for us.
Just a quick note. If you hate podcasts and like The Daily, I would suggest you listen to How I Built This, because they explore a lot of new ideas in technology and how entrepreneurs were basically able to build their businesses from the ground up. And it does it in this very kind of deep, layered way like you're talking about with the ambient content.
All right, I'll give it a shot. It's worth saying that I did. I've softened my stance on this a little bit again with focus group. My husband, but like we moved to New York from DC. My bias on it is that like I feel like New Yorkers are like, yeah, we ought to do a podcast on this. I'm like, all of you are hours on trains, you know, like the rest of the world like commutes by car, and it's just like I worry it's a little insular. But my husband became like this crazy podcast guy since we moved up here, and he keeps being like, I was listening to this podcast and blah, blah. Like, okay. So I've listened to a few more. I'm softening my stance.
All right, I think we have time for one more. Thanks.
Thank you. First off, I really enjoy your presentation.
Thank you.
I'm at DigitalOcean, responsible for the web experience. And before, in my former life, I was at the Financial Times. We experimented. We launched a paywall, video channel, a lot of cool things. My question is more ethical about trusting the news with all this noise and polarization of the news. And secondly, too much news. It's very sensational. You look at news in other countries, it's much more about the facts. Here it's about big headlines and big, drama. So how do you restore trusting the news and make it about, authentic and less about headlines and big sensations and numbers?
Those are really great questions, and I'm going to try to have a concise answer, but I will not. Couple of things in there. Number one, I think that the pendulum's always swinging back and forth, right? And we are way out over here because what rewarded us as companies in the share of attention over the last several years and the way news was socially distributed was things that would be shared. And so commentary is something that's shared a lot. Now look, in newsrooms, like the opinion is over here and the news is over here, and there's this clear dividing line. In newspapers, there's like a clear page for that. Digitally, none of that exists. And we as product people dutifully put opinion on the top of our pages, but people don't see it, And so I think what you'll see as places like Facebook retreat from, being so all in on the news, you'll see publishers kind of retreat back to, hey, look, the share of attention we got for this kind of content is smaller, and as a result, we think the audience for it is smaller, and how do we adjust accordingly? So I think you'll see some publishers react to the changing landscape for platforms, and that may pull us back. When we did, this was one of the coolest things I think we did at my HuffPost/Yahoo time, was during the Listen to America tour that we did in HuffPost. There's a group of UX researchers at Yahoo who said, hey, can we go? You're touring America. Can we go? We want to interview people. And there was this slight East Coast, West Coast disconnect, right? Because the HuffPost journalists were like, oh, we're going to do the interviewing. And the researchers were like, no, different kind of interview and whatever. And they went. They got on the bus. And wow, the stuff they found in these qualitative interviews. They found these people who were saying, no, I don't trust the news. And actually, I know it's not telling me the truth. So I actually go to 7 different sites to try to figure out what's real. Wow. Think about how hard that is. I have an enormous amount of empathy for people who would go through that effort. And then you think about all the people who are no way going to go through that effort. And so they all sort of feel like they can't trust any of this, and they have to fact check it on their own. They have to sleuth it on their own. So US researchers from Yahoo sort of came to this conclusion, hey, look, we have a huge role. Let's create a product where we solve for this. And my big concern is really one of product market fit. Is anyone going to believe us, given the way that news has sort of systematically, losing relevance in people's lives? Newspapers are closing up. We've got a lot of structural headwinds in terms of communities caring about news, right? It's kind of, there's a drumbeat that the mainstream media is lying to you. Structurally, we've been taking blows for years, and then now we're in this fake news tornado that I don't know if we're going to get out of. And so if we were to build it, would they come? If we were to build, hey, look, here's the place where we fact check all the news, or here's our real authentic news site, would people believe in it? It's a risk. But I'm an optimist at heart, and I believe there's a way out of it. And I think some of the success we're seeing with the sale of subscriptions at various publications is saying, hey, look, I believe in quality and I'm going to buy into brand. And one of the reasons I ended up taking this job at Bloomberg is that, like, as a brand, I love it. It's got this massive data pedigree, you know, like where it's coming from is a position of actual numbers. And I think that's something that can really connect and resonate with people. So jury's out about whether this gets repaired and what it looks like at the end of it. But I remember saying during the campaign to a friend, you know, I really hope Donald Trump gets elected because I actually think it forces this pendulum swing. Because, you know, there was all of this, is it fake? Is it a, you know, conspiracy or whatever? And I thought, geez, let's get through that. The only way out is through. And if we keep in this in middle ground, it won't be great. So again, if all product managers kind of veer between, you know, just ship it and be rigorous, get it right, I'm always on the just ship it side. So I guess that's part of my reaction there. But anyway, it's an interesting moment.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Julia. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all. Oh, hey. Also, I am one of those people hiring, and I think I'm supposed to do that in a few minutes. But like,
yes,
whatever,
we'll definitely
come
have that.
talk to me if you want.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
absolutely. And hopefully you can hang around for a few minutes if there's other questions.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, great. Thank you again, everyone, for coming. I have a couple quick announcements before we do shout-outs, and then which is the who's hiring, and then our exciting drawing for the free slippers. So first and foremost, I want to take a moment again to thank mParticle and Amplitude for being our sponsors, and a round of applause for DigitalOcean for setting up the space and the food and drinks tonight. So thank you. Next, I want to talk about next month. On March 21st, we'll have another one of these events. Tickets are currently available on Eventbrite. And our speaker will be Xiaodi Zhang, who is a CPO for First Dibs. And she's going to have a really interesting topic talking about how to take your career from PM to CPO. So it should be a really kind of a different topic for us. So hopefully everybody can come check that out. Also, after this, you will be getting a very, very, very brief survey, and we really hope you fill that out. We take net promoter score very seriously. We currently are ranging around a 50, and we like to keep that high to make sure our content is always good and fresh for you guys. So please, please, please take some time to fill that out. It literally will be just a matter of minutes. So you should be seeing that in your inbox very soon. And with that, why don't we line up anybody who has anything to share in terms of looking for jobs or hiring or just excitement about your company? And we'll, of course, let Julia start since she is our speaker tonight. So if anybody has anything, come on up.
All right, yeah. So Bloomberg Media, division of Bloomberg LP, which is a big data company, The Terminal, you may have heard of it. But on the media group, we serve 55 million people monthly, growing, huge digital business, and our ambition is truly global. And I'm looking for product managers, I am looking for engineers, I'm looking for designers, anyone who wants to build the future. Come holla.
And I realized I failed to introduce myself at the beginning of this presentation tonight. So my name is Ronald. I'm the Director of Product Management. So I lead our product management and project management team at One Kings Lane, just around the corner. So we are an online home decor company owned by Bed Bath & Beyond. And I am actively looking for a product manager as well as a technical project manager. So if anybody has any interest, please let me know. Yeah, that's yes, Terrence, who's a product manager for us as well. We are actively looking for many engineers. So if you have anybody who's interested, please come see either of us afterwards.
Hi, I'm John Harper. My startup company is Grapple.news, and we have approximately 0 global users, but we are looking for engineers, technical product managers. We're building an aggregator that can basically look out across multiple platforms and build the provenance of a news event. So we're trying to create a form of accountability through aggregating data. And if you're interested in what we're doing, come say hi. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dennis. I'm the product manager at Noteworth. At Noteworth, we help physicians and healthcare systems to provide virtual care models for their patients. We're hiring for a few engineering roles right now, 2 full-stack engineers, 1 Android, as well as a mobile PM and a designer. if you'd like to hear from us a little bit more, we'll be right over here. We have two other team members right here.
Hi all, I'm Shin, and I'm working in the media startup company related to the news aggregation platform based on the commentary platform. And we are hiring the iOS and Android developers and also the curation editors. So we are a kind of aggregation platform. So we always curate it day by day. So if you're interested in, please let me know. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So Terrence, if you could help me do our drawing. We hope that we didn't mess up the ticket exchange. It's a very complicated process, and so hopefully we got that down. Julie, you want to draw a ticket? Sure. You? No, close. People are still looking. Want to read it again? Oh, excellent. All right. Excellent. What's your name? Alex. All right. Congratulations, Alex. Thank you. All right. All right. So once again, thank you, DigitalOcean, for the slippers as well as the space. As we kind of wrap up tonight, please, there's trash and recycle bins on the way out. Please help us keep the place clean for them so they keep letting us come back. And with that, thank you again for coming. And thank you again, Julia, for being here. Until next month.